I was hidden around the corner from a throng of giant superpowered security robots. I couldn't get to the front door of the palace without alerting them and the royal guards patrolling alongside. There was no way round the back. The fence was too high to climb. Seemingly, my only option was to turn back and start all over again. Until I noticed the fish. I couldn't, could I? The school was hovering in the stream underneath the bridge leading to the palace. There was a drain tunnel that seemingly led inside. I had the power to inhabit creatures for a time, but there's always a queue for that. This school of fish was surely just environmental dressing, but it doesn't hurt to try. And just like that, I was in. Dishonored is a wild game. One minute you're scrambling along rooftops and breaking into people's apartments. The next you're using magical abilities to take control of rats and bend the fabric of time. What makes the game so special though, is how heavily it leans into its core game design philosophy. One which harkens back to the early days of PC gaming. One which vast swathes of games borrow from to one degree or another. I am, of course, talking about the Immersive Sim. The term Immersive Sim gets bandied about quite a bit without ever really being contextualized or properly understood. The basic theory makes sense. You're given a mission and a bunch of potential ways to solve it, and it's up to you to figure out the best way to go about it. But there are loads of games that do this, yet you wouldn't call them Immersive Sims. Be they big open world RPGs, shooters, and even platformers. We see the term applied when it shouldn't be, and not applied when it should. So just what the hell is an immersive sim then? And why am I even talking about them in 2023? Immersive sims are games where you can crawl through vents. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. No, okay, wait, stop. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. However, pretty much all immersive sims do seem to use vents as a means of adding to its wide array of tools and systems to give the player as much agency as possible. We'll have a look at this later. To understand immersive sims, you have to look at where they came from. Some would posit that the first immersive sim is a little-known Japanese game called Portopia Serial Murder Case. For a game released in 1983, its level of player freedom in solving the game's puzzles was astonishing. However, immersive sims as we understand them today truly originate in Ultima Underworld: The Stygian Abyss, released for MS-DOS in 1992. The game was a sequel to the Ultima game series, but the first to appear in a first-person perspective. The focus throughout the game's development was what was termed emergent gameplay, leaning heavily into the tabletop RPG idea of being able to do whatever you want and solve problems in any number of ways. The game had an incredible lineup of talent behind it, including Richard Garriott, the man credited for inventing the entire MMORPG genre, and Warren Spector, who we'll get back to later. When the game was released, the team were amazed at the ingenious and creative ways players were finding of dealing with the game's combat and puzzles. Rather than beating boss fights or passing difficult obstacles as the devs had intended, players were finding other ways around it, using the tools the game offered in ways they'd never even thought of. This sparked something in the mind of Warren Spector, who a few years later would create System Shock, another big step forward for the emergent gameplay concept. But it was his next game that truly set the standard. In the year 2000, he finished work on his magnum opus, a little game called Deus Ex. Created during the heyday of John Romero's developer-first game studio Ironstorm, Deus Ex took the ideas of emergent gameplay and systems-led design to its most extreme. Focusing on player agency in every aspect of its mission design, you decided what weapons you wanted to use to approach the mission at hand. As you progress, you come to realize just how many ways around a problem are available to you. This might sound fairly rudimentary by today's standards, but in the year 2000, no one had encountered anything like this before. Deus Ex is a seminal work in gaming that won multiple awards and inspired countless titles thereafter, despite never really being a commercial success. But Warren Spector wasn't the only one pioneering this new genre. Just 1 year later, a little-known developer named Ken Levine helped write Thief, a game that took heavy inspiration from Ultima Underworld and took these new design philosophies back to its medieval fantasy roots. Thief was the precursor to a bunch of franchises we love today, including Hitman and Splinter Cell, and Levine would go on to produce one of the most acclaimed series ever in BioShock. The legacy of this first wave of immersive sims certainly resonates throughout gaming history. Ultima, Deus Ex and Thief all garnered widespread critical acclaim and are considered some of the greatest games ever made. Yet unfortunately, they were not commercially successful, being unable to keep up with competitors like Half-Life and Doom. Publishers looked at these numbers and decided that the audience for these types of games was just too niche compared to more straightforward shooters, and it seemed the immersive sim was dead. But around a decade later, games began to emerge that honoured the immersive sim legacy, using the concepts of what made these games so great, and adding in more modern sensibilities for a new audience, brought the ideas prevalent in immersive sims to a new wave of video game fans. From The Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Fallout 3, and Stalker: Shadow of Chernobyl, these landmark titles in gaming's history brought in some of the concepts from immersive sims to provide more player freedom to their genres. But why is it that I refer to these games as having elements of immersive sims and not actually being immersive sims? Well, it's a question of focus. The Elder Scrolls Oblivion is first and foremost an RPG. The game is designed around players building a character based around stats, finding weapons and magic skills that work for them, and ultimately role-playing as a character. Player freedom comes in how you build your character and in what manner you approach the world. Those smaller objectives you'll encounter, however, are very much linear. But it is not about offering differing ways of completing an objective, not in your approach to the world itself. Let me show you an example of what I'm blathering on about from one of the truest immersive sims released around this time, 2012's Dishonored. In this first mission, you're given one main objective: assassinate High Overseer Campbell. You're dropped off at a small beach at the edge of town, with a marker pointing you in the right direction. And then it's all up to you as to how you go about it. You can be sneaky and stalk the streets, silently taking down guards as you go. Or you can clamber along the rooftops using your blink teleport ability. Or you can go underground and crawl through the sewers and ventilation systems. See? I said there'd be vents. Or you can go in guns blazing and destroy everything in your path. And that's just getting to the building the Overseer is in. When you get there, you've got a whole bunch of ways to deal with him, along with the captain he's talking to, Kerno. You can discover that Campbell is planning to spike Kerno's drink, and by swapping the glasses, the job's already done for you. Or you can lay down some traps and let them slice themselves to pieces. Or you can summon a swarm of rats to chomp down on the victims. Or you can lure them down to Campbell's secret basement, wait for Campbell to kill Kerno, then kill Campbell yourself. Or you can let Kerno get killed, then knock out Campbell, take him to an interrogation room and physically brand him to discredit him from his peers. Or you can go in guns blazing and destroy everything in your path. The point here is the game isn't telling you how to complete the objective, or guiding you through a series of scripted events like other games of the period. There is no one correct way to complete your goal here. It simply gives you a bunch of tools, mechanics and systems, a world designed to exploit them, and lets you figure it out for yourself. The game demands you treat it like a toy box, abusing the save state system and trying your hardest to break the game. The world and its objectives offer freedom to the player. So if these games are so great, why are so few developers making them? Well, the issue is twofold. On the one hand, these games are incredibly difficult to make, and on the other, they're rarely, if ever, commercially successful. It makes sense that games like these are a challenge for developers. To try and anticipate all the various ways players might think to approach any given situation, and then implement mechanics to facilitate that, could essentially be endless. And all these systems have to both interlock with each other and be consistent, so players can guarantee they know what will happen when they use items or interact with enemy AI. Not only is that complicated, but also incredibly time-consuming. And so it would make sense that with all the hard work that goes into making a game like this, publishers need these games to make enough money to justify investing in them. The funny thing is, unlike in the early 2000s, these games did sell well. Dishonored is in the top 10 best-selling games of the 2010s, And the sequels to Deus Ex, Human Revolution and Mankind Divided sold a combined 12 million units. Yet just like in the early 2000s, publishers just didn't want to continue backing these types of games in favour of the ever-growing influence of microtransactions and the mobile gaming economy. And so once again, it appeared the immersive sim was dead. But that brings us to today. And if it seems that the big publishers are refusing to get involved in this underrepresented genre, then it's up to the smaller developers to take up the reins. Take Weird West from Wolfeye Studios, headed up by former members of Arcane, the studio behind Dishonored. Using a team far smaller than anything at Arcane, Wolfeye were able to create a whole new type of immersive sim, set in a unique sci-fi American West and viewed from an isometric perspective. And they're not the only ones. There's Cruelty Squad, a game that looks, well, like this. But remarkably, is actually an immersive sim. You get given targets and a whole bunch of tools to unlock, and you're free to have at it however you want. There's also Gloomwood, a game very much inspired by the Thief series, adding a dark Lovecraftian twist and a generous helping of toys to play with. We haven't even got time to mention Blood West, The Occupation, Control-Alt-Ego, a remake of the original System Shock. The list goes on. And then there's Shadows of Doubt, the game that inspired this entire piece. This is something I went into with no expectations and came out absolutely astonished. It's the most immersive of immersive sims, featuring an entire town full of completely explorable high-rise buildings, kitted out with ventilation systems, flats full of stuff to root through, NPCs to chat to, an entire phone system you can hack into and manipulate, and so much more besides. You play as a rogue detective, investigating murders by breaking into random homes, interrogating people, and generally causing a nuisance. The scenarios are procedurally generated, meaning no playthrough is ever the same, and figuring out the perpetrators requires genuine detective skills and analysis of evidence, rather than just brute forcing your way through with trial and error. But more than anything else, Shadows of Doubt gives me hope, as does Weird West, Cruelty Squad, Gloomwood. The immersive sim genre is one that the video game industry has flirted with without ever fully embracing. Yet the design principles are something that can only work in video games. They use the very foundations of interactivity, emergent gameplay, narrative, and player agency to create something truly unique to the format. The Last of Us was an excellent game, but it worked just as well as a TV series. Dishonored just wouldn't work in the same way, because you tell the stories, not the game. So, here's to the immersive sim, and the developers putting in the hours to bring back this underappreciated genre. And if you could include the ability to possess fish, I'd be hugely grateful.